Well, hey, welcome everybody. I want to say thank you so much for joining us here at LightBox. This is Marvel Comics' first year at LightBox. Yeah, really excited. Really excited to have you guys here with us to talk and learn from each other. We're excited to be here. And so just to recap, so you know you're in the right room. This is the more than just the Marvel Way Marvel Comics publishing panel. Okay, everybody? We've never done this panel before. This is a brand new panel that y'all are seeing for the first time. So I'll jump right in for introductions. First up, right here next to me, is Cebulski, the editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics.
I don't even know if we really need these mics.
Yeah, I'm going to try to enunciate, but if anyone can hear, just let us know.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. I really like the intimacy of this. It's great. Like I said, it's our first year out at Lightbox. We prepared a panel that to just start and go through the basics, because I know this has been for the last 3 years traditionally a convention for visual artists and animators and cartoonists and whatnot. But we figured, since we're the comic book guys, like there's some stigma, like, if I want to work at Marvel, I have to draw in this style, or this is the way that it works. And we wanted to just really show everyone that it's Marvel's always been a company that broke the boundaries of when it comes to artists. There is no house style, from when it was like Jack Kirby and John Romita and Steve Ditko to the 80s when it was John Byrne and Bill Sienkiewicz and Walt Simonson. Everybody draws in different styles. And now not only do we have artists that draw in different styles from all over the world, we've been experimenting a lot recently, which we'll get into different art forms and some of the other places and other things you can do if you wanted to illustrate for Marvel, from package design and toys and cover illustrations of video games and all that. We don't really touch on it, but we do advise on a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
And after we get to the end of the presentation, we're open for questions of any and all kinds from you all to just answer what you need to know if you're interested in working with us.
Yeah. And next up here, just so you all know me, I'm Rickey Purdin. I'm the Talent Scout, Director of Talent Relations at Marvel Comics. I help bring in artists and talent. And when I say artists, I mean pencilers, inkers, colorists, digital artists, all kinds of artists for all the different needs that we have at the company. Like CB just said, we don't work on the direct packaging for the toy line necessarily, but we do work with the people there who hire. And they look for certain kinds of things and all the different kinds of things they're hiring for, and we help them cast those folks. So as CB said, we've never done this before, and so we wanted to try to explain to some of y'all here how comic books are made. Give kind of a really step-by-step breakdown for a couple of interior pages, so you see what it's like to work on a real Marvel comic, and also run through some of how we approach cover art for our comic books at Marvel, because I don't know how many of you here are familiar with comic books, but there's, a regular cover, a variant cover, a retailer variant cover, incentive covers, all these different kinds of covers that we make, and all of them require different kinds of aesthetics and styles and looks and approaches to art styles. And so that's one of the biggest ways we've been able to diversify the Marvel style, is that, like CB said, it's not just John Byrne or John Buscema, or like a regular Marvel style. We really opened it up to a wide variety of styles.
We used to start off when we did similar, like breaking into comics panels at comic book conventions for artists. We would always say, the question we get asked the most is, how do I break into Marvel? And it's like, there is no real set way to break into Marvel. And there's a quote that was attributed to a writer named Mark Waid, but Mark said it came from Devin Grayson, another comic book writer. Is like, breaking into Marvel is like breaking out of jail. Like, once someone finds a way to do it, like Shawshank Redemption, that way is covered up, and you got to find your own path in. And that's not necessarily the case now. Guys like Rickey and his team have kind of streamlined the system, and we have processes in place. But a lot of times it's it's what it's who it's how good you are, it's what you're good at, right place, right time. There's a million different ways to do that. And we're just gonna walk you through how the comic gets made to start. As some of you may know, traditionally when Marvel started, it was Stan Lee who was running the bullpen and writing most of the comics, working with Wally Wood or John Buscema, John Romita, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, and he was writing so many comics once it took off, he didn't have time to write full script, or what we call screenplay style.
Yeah.
And so what he would do is write what became known as the Marvel way, and that was just, he would get on his typewriter and he would type out 1 or 2 pages, like start with Spider-Man in his room in Queens. He wakes up, he eats his wheat cakes, he goes to the Daily Bugle, Green Goblin attacks, mayhem ensues, he comes back, he misses his day with Mary Jane, she gets angry, and he goes to bed. And then, the artist would take that and then break that down into 22 pages. And then Stan would go in after the fact and put all the dialogue in. And that was called the Marvel way. But the way that only maybe it's like 4 or 5 writers now who work that way.
Yeah.
You know, Peter David,
Dan Slott,
DeFalco. Most people work now what's called the screenplay way. Just exactly what you would do for a major motion picture or a TV show. You know, page 1, panel 1. You know, sun sets over New York. Page 1, panel 2. Spider-Man swings across the city, and it's really you as we go through this, you'll see where adjustments are made because the writer writes it as a full screenplay, but it's not up to the artist to really follow it exactly. It's kind of a guide or a letter to the artist to say, this is what I'm thinking. If you have a better way to do it, feel free to do it, or let's talk about it. It's the start of something. But comics are really a true collaboration.
Yeah.
It's between the writer and the artist. And again, getting down to the real basics, it's pretty much 6 people that go into making a comic on a monthly basis. It's the writer, the penciler, the inker, the colorist, the letterer, and the editor. And then that doesn't take into the account all the team that goes in after that. You know, the post-production and all the different people that go in and do the color corrections and things in-house for us.
Manufacturing,
you put it together. But from the start to where the comic is sent to print, there's really those 6 people who are involved in it.
Yeah. And something really great, I don't know how many folks here are from Pasadena, like around this neighborhood, or how many folks flew in for this show. But of those 6 people on a comic book, many of them don't live in the same country.
Yep.
Many of them have never met. And so one of the magical things about comic book collaboration is that, especially now in the internet day and age, everybody can work together across the world. And we hire talent from literally around the world, from Asia, Russia, Europe, South America, Canada, America, everywhere we look for talent that are the best to do Marvel comic books. And so one thing we do at the regular panels, the break-in to Comics the Marvel Way panel, is I like to ask, since I feel like a big group of this the population at this show are people interested in working, by a show of hands, how many of the people here are artists? Wow, that's more than most panels about breaking into comics. So I just got goosebumps that the first row can see. So I'm excited to walk through this process with y'all and make you a little bit more aware of how this stuff works. So CB pointed out before, this is a regular Marvel script. This is the first page of the issue number 1 of the Reset Amazing Spider-Man by Zeb Wells. Zeb is a screenwriter, very talented comic book writer. And the artist on this new launch of the series is John Romita Jr. Johnny's got a 40-year career in comics. He's one of the best storytellers that's ever worked with Marvel. Really powerful, dynamic visual style in his art. And this is a book that does have a penciler, an inker, and a colorist. And we'll walk through each of these steps with y'all. So this is what a script typically looks like. I had to block out some secrets because some of it was going to give away some future stuff. I don't know if people here care about that stuff, but I had to block out some things.
The internet will care.
Yeah, the internet will care.
And if you can't hear us in the back, please raise your hand and say, hey, speak up, or hey, talking to the mic a little bit more. All good? Okay, we got the thumbs up.
Great. So as you can see here is a panel description. Quick note to Johnny from Zeb about being excited to collaborate with them. It just says, there's this big hole in the middle of nowhere. There's a figure in the middle of the hole in panel 2. It's broken down just like a screenplay, like CB said. Panel 3 starts to make sense. It's Spider-Man. He's hunched over. Gives a little bit of detail about his posture. Panel 4 gives even more detail about the device in his hand and how distraught he looks. In panel 5, there's this lets out this big cry. Johnny's doing a lot of great. If for anybody here who's a student of cinema, Johnny did a great job slowly setting the scene and slowly zooming in, and then ending on this big open shot. The next page, which I don't have, is what's called a splash page, and it's just a full page shot of Spider-Man screaming to the heavens. But really powerful way to set up this first issue of a brand new launch. I think page 3 goes to like present day, and Spider-Man's eating pizza on a rooftop or something. But so you can get a sense of what Johnny does here in the pencils. They're not completely refined, finished line art, but it gives a clear enough understanding of lighting, of the environment, the textures in the environment, all these important elements, so that then when you bring in the inker, who in this case is Scott Hanna. Scott's been in comic books for probably 30, 35 years, right behind Johnny. You can see in this side-by-side comparison what Johnny does on the page and then what Scott needs to do to refine all that, to bring definition to the scene, to add texture, line weights, even lean into the lighting a little bit more, make it clear what exactly is going on in this scene.
And, some of you might be illustrators and you pencil ink and color your own work, and that's something we'll get to later. But the reason that this system was established was, again, with the bullpen system back with Marvel. Stan was cranking out scripts. They just didn't want an artist to take 2 days on one page. It was 1 day pencils or 2 pages pencil a day, and then just pass the inks off to somebody else and let them go.
Right.
And a lot of times, part of our job is also talent management. And it's dealing with some disgruntled people, let's say. And the biggest clashes we sometimes have are between the penciler and the inker because their styles don't line up. And when you find a pencil and inker that work well together, we keep them together. Yeah. So Johnny and Scott worked together for when Scott got in, probably. So when Johnny came back, he said, I want Scott doing me. We'll try different, with newer pencilers, we'll try different inkers over them to find the right combination to make sure everybody's comfortable. And a lot of times now, though, a lot of penciler and ink people, especially with digital, the digital process now, are able to do 1 page a day with pencils and inks for themselves. So there's a lot of different ways that we can work with those different disciplines.
And it's been years since he did work, obviously, but Jack Kirby would do something like 2.5 books a month, 3 books a month, which is insane right now for anybody familiar with comics. Johnny does a page a day, which is still pretty crazy, and he cranks out the pages at a certain schedule. He's made this into a profession for himself. He has a life. He's got a family. He travels. He's got hours of the day where he works, and then he's done because he knows that the other 5 people in that, and the other 4 people in that collaboration that CB mentioned before, the inker, the colorist, and the letterer, require him to turn his stuff on time. So just because he's in the seat and drawing Amazing Spider-Man #1 doesn't mean he can take as much time as he wants. That's an important lesson for anyone trying to break into any field. Once you get in the door, you still have to do the work because you're only as good as the current job that you're on. And if this job doesn't go well, there's not going to be a next job. So this is the best example of a very tight working relationship. Johnny, by the way, lives in Queens or Long Island. Scott lives in, I want to say, Florida.
Yeah, Florida, yeah.
And the colorist in this book is Marcio Menez. Marcio is Brazilian. He lives in Sao Paulo. And so as you can see, if you compare the left and the right there, Marcio understood a lot of what the lighting was, the textures, where he needed to go in and do a little bit more, quote unquote, digital painting. Back in the day, it was really 4-color coloring. And they would combine colors here and there to make different kinds of depths of color. But nowadays, with digital coloring, for anybody who understands what I'm about to say, you can color an RGB on your screen as much as you want. But when you convert it to CMYK, which is what we do, and you've all probably done this and printed it out and noticed everything gets muddy and vomity and you want to throw it all away. Marcio and a bunch of colorists who are his peers have learned really how to manage that CMYK range of colors. And keeping that CMYK preview up when they're coloring in RGB so they can see how it's going to look. And sometimes switching it back and forth, converting it back and forth from RGB to CMYK can help them just hone in on exactly what it's going to look like when it prints. So I say all that because he's got these really rich purples, these violets in the scene, but he's also got these really true reds. And so he didn't overwhelm the page with a lot of different kinds of variations of reds. He really stuck with what's bold where it needs to be bold, so he's drawing the reader's eye to where it needs to go. And he's using those purples and haziness in the background to kind of set the stage for the reader.
And the other person in the process, actually, that I forgot about is me.
Yeah.
Because I see all this, actually. So when I saw this page, just a funny behind-the-scenes story how this stuff goes, is I saw the page and I called the editor Nick Lowe or Zoomed him or Slacked him or whatever we do these days. I think it was an actual call. And I said, look, I don't think the purple works as the first page of a new launch. I said, I think we'd be better off going with more like a fire tone, like orange and yellow, like a fiery scene that'll really pop and make the reader think, oh, is that a volcano? Or like add some mystery to it rather than what's this purple haze? But that's when Nick got back to me and he said, oh, no, trust me. He's like, in the payoff in issue 19 or 20,
yeah,
you're going to find out why it's purple. So that's the kind of the part of the process is the creative process is knowing what's going on and making sure that there's an open line of communication between all the people who work to know exactly what they're doing on. So when they colored this scene, specifically, though, they told Marcio from the beginning, make it purple because it's going to pay off, 17 issues later.
Right. And there's some specific things. I don't want to bore you guys with some of this stuff, but is this all right? This is really exciting. There's some specific things about coloring for comic books specifically, just language that was created years ago before CB and I were ever born. Purple and green are the colors of evil. Like Green Goblin and most of Spider-Man's bad guys are purple or green or some combination of that. So there's just an inherent sinister nature to those hues in comics and especially in Spider-Man's world. And so when he sticks with his red and blue primaries and you bring in colors like purple and green, it adds complication. And so Marcio knew that when building the scene and really used it to create a philosophy of his own color palette for this whole series. So then the next technical part of this is lettering. And lettering is definitely a profession that we hire a very specific group of people to work on, but because of those skills that they have over the years. And so you can see here contrast between the script, and you can see exactly the text that Zeb put down in the script versus what was put into the final page. And there's a design element to the lettering. The letterer used the first G to make it very small. Oh, first of all, the location, setting the scene up top. It's a very slick trick that the whole team pulled off, which is setting the stage, setting the environment, placing your reader in a place. So that location stamp up at the top left with the white outline stroke, so it stands out on top of whatever colors might be on the background, and then using almost like a dance move, a ballet with all the lettering techniques he's got in there, and the big gah release at the end. So that red on top of the purple again just makes it pop more, makes it more exciting. So that's just one simple page from Amazing Spider-Man. We wanted to start with that because it was a real straightforward, traditional look of a Marvel comic.
And going back to the letterer 1 sec, a lot of people back in the past used to think that, lettering's just part of a production process. You know, you're just like someone who plugs in at the end and they have no say in the book or they don't have any artistic skills, which is completely not true. Back when it was hand lettered, there was, and put in the sound effects, it was a true art. And now the art, the lettering or the lettering artists, as we end up calling them now, really need to know how to, the size of the balloons, the shapes, the fonts, the colors, how to carry the eye through. So, lettering in itself is an art, and we never, don't give the credit to the people who do this amazing stuff.
Yeah, it's really small, dumb things like, it's not dumb, but the GA, there's a white stroke outline. It helps it pop off of the violet behind it. It's just really small things like that make this professional lettering, some of the best lettering in comics. So there are small things you may not notice when you read comics that we look for in our letters. The next artist is someone who we're really excited about, and we just saw her last week at New York Comic Con, is Peach Momoko. So Peach Momoko, yeah, they can clap for Peach. That's okay. Peach, you'll see the final page here in a bit. Maybe if you're not familiar with her name, you'll recognize her art. Peach was an artist working in Japan. She'd come to the States for a bit. She was working in different comic book marketplaces. Her style isn't necessarily traditionally Japan broadly, but there are so many Japanese folklore influences on her art, but also horror and war films, goth, and psychology behind her work that's really fascinating. And so we first brought her in for cover work, and then we brought her in for CB spoke with her about doing interior art and writing her comic series, and that's what this is. It's a series called Demon Days, where she re-envisions Marvel characters in a Japanese
folklore setting,
horror folklore setting with Japanese spirits. And so her script, she's writing for herself, and she does her own layouts, pencils, inks, and colors. So this is a different art style and a single artist writer working on this project.
Yeah, traditionally in Japan, when they do manga, they don't write any kind of script. They just sit down with their editor, they talk it through, and then they go right to layouts, and they put all the dialogue in the actual layouts themselves. But because Peach is working in Japan, and the editor, Lindsay Kohik, since she doesn't speak Japanese, we requested that in this case, Peach go through and actually loosely, as you'll see, plot out what she's going to do, so we can at least make comments about the script before she actually goes in, so she won't have to make as many changes in the layouts going forward.
So you see her, because she's writing for herself, her script is probably a lot more simple than you would for an artist if you were a writer. But she's got the panel breakdown and the text. And these are her basic scripts. We call these thumbnails or layouts. There's lots of different words for it. But a really quick breakdown of what you're going to put on the page. That's super important because as an artist and you're really excited, you want to just get started. I just want to draw. But if you don't have some sort of skeleton there, it could completely fall in on itself. So it's really important to take time to plan out what you need to plan out so that then you can run. Just walk a little bit and then you can run. So next up is a comparison of what her thumbnails are like to her quote-unquote pencils. And basically this is a a level of detail where if we needed to bring in a Scott Hanna or some other professional inker, they could render this pencil drawing. But Peach really tightens things up so she can show her editor what she has in mind for the story. Next up is her pencils to inks. So even though she's going to be painting this, she did still pencil and ink it. So she has that extra definition in the line work, that extra texture. And I guess extra nightmares. The last step here, and I don't mean to run through Peach's pages, but this is beautiful. The last step here is her coloring. And so you can see that the comparison between the inks and the colors. There's so much rich storytelling going on, not just in the detail of the monsters that she's drawn here, but also just the juxtaposition of that kind of gray nighttime feeling in the background, that cool nighttime feeling, and this bright, scary world that's in front of her.
And the thing with I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And Peach is someone who watercolors. She paints, so she does not use digital coloring. So she'll render these, as however she wants in whatever medium. Sometimes she does some scenes in color marker or crayon or colored pencil. And then, to deliver the pages, we have an FTP and they're delivered over the FTP. But some artists, of course, use scanners and send them in. But what we're finding now is a lot of artists have just buying high-def digital cameras and taking the shots. So peaches are all photographed on Canon or Nikon. I forget what. Malieve just bought a new setup, and he was telling me about the way that they find them even better than scanners.
Which is wild because back in the day, again, let's say back in the day, but 90s and earlier, they used to photograph the pages to send them off to the printer. So they would set the pages and they would photograph them and send them off before scanners, obviously. So now we're back at a place where the cameras are getting even better than the scanners that we created. And so then this is the lettering setup here. So you can see her what seemed like a pretty basic script. She did have, and I'll jump back to that previous slide for you guys. She did have basic guides for where she wanted those captions to go on panel 1. And then basically where it would go on panel 2 there. And then where it actually showed up here at the end. So that planning, that layout is really important so that when you get to the end, everybody's on the same page, even if you are the only writer, pencil, or inker, and colors on the project. Yes?
I thought it was interesting because it's so cool that you were saying too about the purple and green for Eagle. And although this is really bright, she does have the green in her, so there's kind of like that knowledge of that going in, even though it's a different kind of green and not as dark, but that it's scary in a way too.
Yeah, people think that comic books are for kids, but there's a sophisticated color theory game that goes into it all, really, honestly, if you sit down and plan it out right. But you're absolutely right. And so we wanted to show this to this audience specifically because it's two different kinds of artists. Again, the idea being that there's not one art style at Marvel. And I said at the beginning, a big example of that is our covers. And so I was going to transition into covers next. And I wanted to say before I did, we were going to open it up to questions at the end in case anyone had any questions. But you can also definitely raise your hand because this is a very small room. So if you've got a question in the moment, please ask.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like this to be a conversation. So, yeah.
So when CB said before he's the seventh person in the collaboration, CB approves literally every cover that Marvel creates. And so that approval process begins with a sketch. This is a new, I don't think we've shown this cover yet, but this is a new series we have coming up called Silver Surfer Ghostlight. We just announced it last week at New York Comic Con. And this is a variant cover by longtime Marvel exclusive artist Marco Coquetto. Marco is a penciler, inker, colorist himself too. And at the beginning of the process, you turn in concept sketches. So this is a sketch from Marco that came in. An editor contacted him and said, we have a new Silver Surfer book. We'd love to have you be a part of it. As a cover artist, can you do a cool Silver Surfer image? Easy peasy, right? But a million people have done a shot of Silver Surfer just surfing through space. And it looks cool when he does it, so it makes sense we have a bunch of those. But he wanted to do something a little bit different, and to convey what he had planned, he wanted to show Surfer doing this surf move. I don't know what it's called, down an ollie, off of some meteorite or something in space.
And then just taking it one step back, if you don't mind. Marco has, like Ricky said, has been working for us for a long time, so we trust him. We know what he does. So he's the kind of guy who only needs to really turn in one cover sketch. Sometimes he'll turn in two, but for most artists, we ask that they turn in a selection between 2 to 4 cover sketches, just so we have a variety to pick from. Some artists turn in 6. We work with one artist who turns in 17, 20 cover sketches, and sometimes we're like, oh, we'll take 3, 8, and 15.
Yeah,
It's got 3 covers out of one gig because they're so different. But each editor and each artist has a different way of working. There's a shorthand between people who've been working a long time, and for newer people, we often ask for a little bit more to provide us with options, and we can also help give guidance that way as well as to what we're looking for.
Yeah, yeah.
And then sometimes the editor has a specific, or the writer per se gets involved here and has a specific vision in mind of what they would like for the cover, and will give notes or give some cover prompts. And other times it's like, no, just draw something cool, so.
And Marco did all of those things. He did a cool shot of Silver Surf here. It was approved basically. He adjusted the composition a little bit for the final, but this is the final piece. Again, color theory in place, not using too many complicated colors. And I'll keep this really short because I could talk about this for weeks. Cover composition is really important in the comic book marketplace. Traditionally, cover composition involved negative space at the top for the cover logo, in the issue number and in the price, and some version of simple space down the left hand or right hand columns, so that it could be racked on shelves clearly. So that if you're a kid walking into a shop or a collector walking into a shop, you know that's Silver Surfer, that's Amazing Spider-Man, because you can see the logo pretty easily. Nowadays, we play a little bit more fast and loose with that, especially with comic book sales moving to online and in the retail outlets being so different now. But that's generally been the traditional compositional way we approach covers.
There's this classic document from DC back in the 40s or 50s about when comics were more for kids, let's say. It was about what to cover elements that kids like that sell comics. And it was a dinosaur, gorilla, motorcycle, fire.
Yeah.
The colors yellow and purple, and then there was something else. So if you go back and you look at older DC covers, with that in mind, you can totally see that the
Gorillas on motorcycles with purple cigars. Yeah.
Our list included a chevron arrangement.
Oh, really?
Flash, Hero vs. Villain.
Hiller vs. Villain. Okay, yep.
And so, but that layout still, that composition is still super effective.
Yeah.
So this is more of a traditional style with someone who does line art and colors. It's digital colors, obviously, but he rendered it completely. If you took all the color out, you would have a fully rendered black and white drawing that indicates texture and light. And he just embellished all that in his color fade.
And working with the editor, you could see where the changes were made. It's like, the board was too close to the top? Can you put it on down so that we don't worry about getting cropped? Can you remove some of the elements in front of the board so we can get a better look at it? Remove some of the planets in front of the big purple planet in the back, just to clear up the composition and make it a little bit simpler. So it's sometimes there are simple notes like those that are given that are very easy to adjust, and other times we get cover sketch like, no, this completely doesn't work at all. We got to go back to ground, which is why we like to get multiple sketches.
And so that's a line artist and a color artist. Next is an artist who is a digital artist entirely. This artist is In-hyuk Lee, a Korean artist that we've worked with for probably the past 3 or 4 years.
Oh, no, it's before COVID. So it was 2015, I think. So almost 7 years now.
Yeah. And he's only gotten stronger. Again, he's in the Korean market, and he typically is another artist who shows up and just gives us a couple of sketches. One sketch usually does it, and we're fine. But he goes from basically sketch, once it's approved, to completed rendered art. And so for anybody here who's done digital art, digital painting, animatics, 3D model work, you can see a lot of the skills and techniques that are required in those fields in In-hyuk's line art here. There's a lot of things that aren't in his sketch, that details aren't in his sketch that show up in the final line art, like the lacing on the shoulder pad, and the detail on the buckles in the glove. Some of the lighting details, a little bit of her facial expression has adjusted a little bit. And this variant cover was for a program that we did during the AAPI month for Captain Marvel number 31. And he did a series of different Marvel characters in a little bit more of a Korean streetwear fashion style to celebrate the culture of his community. And so this just shows you kind of the difference between the digital artist that we started working with more recently versus someone who's a more traditional line artist and colorist.
And this kind of style too requires a level of trust between the editor and artist as well, because once you approve that sketch, you know it's coming in fully rendered, and he's moving on to the next one because he's actually quite quick. So he'll go in and make a couple changes. I think there were a couple changes here on the background green and maybe on some of the texture on some of the straps. But other than that, you know, you hire the artist because you know you can trust him, and you're going to get what you want in time with nominal changes.
Yeah, and he's a great group. The group of these AAPI Heritage Month covers this year, they're fantastic. Some of my favorite things he's ever done. And it's really simple in composition. There's no background, but there's an attitude. And as a set, these are really great for fans who want to pick up a full set. Just consistent quality across in style and attitude across the entire line of these books. Next up, I just wanted to kind of show you. I just showed between those two. Yeah.
How fast is the turnaround on these letters?
Well, so Marco can do about a cover a month for us, because Marco also does a 20-page interior gig on our main Daredevil book. He does the interior art for Daredevil. He doesn't color that. Recently, he's been getting faster and faster. There was a point where Marco was doing 2 books a month, but we asked him to slow down a little bit and focus on just the one. And they both look great, but then when he slowed down, there was even more quality in the storytelling of just the one book. And he started saying, hey, I've been on Daredevil for a few years now. I'd like to do a little bit more. So can you spread me around the Marvel Universe? And so we got him 1 cover gig a month. That's completely manageable. Inhyuk can do a cover in a week. This cover from sketch to finished art is about a week. So he can do them even faster than that when he wants to. But because these were of a set, it took him a little bit longer. So 1 week for each cover. But he can do a cover in about 3 days. Peach Momoko can do a cover in about 4 hours.
And he's not kidding.
No, it's insane. You would think she had a drawer of these, and when we ask her for something, she just shows up with one of the ones that's finished. But that's unusual. But something that she learned, and this is important to remember, is that just because Jack Kirby did 3 or 4 books a month, and just because Johnny can do a page a day, you really need to, as you break into the industry that you're interested in breaking into, and hopefully it's comics, recognize that just because you can go faster, it may not mean better quality. And just because you can go faster, and this is something Peach has said in public, she got worried that she was doing close to 10 covers a month because it was oversaturating her fan base, had to go pick up all these covers, and it made less of them be able to stand out on their own. And if she poured more energy into, say, 5 a month, she was still ahead of the curve and doing more than most people, more prolific than most people, and it looked better than it did when she was doing 10 a month. You have to balance that speed versus quality. And basically these days for interior artists, if you can do about 3.5 pages a week, you're in the average. 3.5 pages a week. That's about 6 weeks for a book.
For 20 pages.
For 20-page comic, yeah. 3.5 pages a week means you can do about 6 weeks per book, which means you're going to be able to finish about 10 comics in a year total. With holidays off and spending time with your family and getting exercise and taking care of yourself, that's speed.
Yes.
If you're John Romita Jr. and you're John Romita quality, and you've been doing it for 40 years and you know how to do it a page a day and still keep that quality up, 5 pages a week is great. We love that. We'll keep more of that. But
when we say a week, we expect it to be a business week, a 5-day week. But that really is up to each individual artist if they choose to work on the weekends or not. One sec. And then, so some artists will just we don't mind working the weekends. Like Humberto Ramos. He loves to work weekends. He likes drawing clears his head, so he'll spend time with his family. At night before bed, he'll go and he'll just pencil at night on Saturdays and Sundays before he goes. But other people just have strict rules, like Mark Bagley. Starts at 9, ends at 5, clocks in and out, make sure he gets that page a day done, takes the weekends off, but he knows that he factors that into his deadline. If he goes on vacation, he'll go faster, or he'll let us know, and we will take a skip month or something like that. But yeah, so it's when you're an artist, when you get a job for Marvel, we'll give you your deadlines. Those deadlines aren't going to move. It's up to you to adjust to your schedule unless you talk to the editor ahead of time and say, look, I'm going to be away for Christmas, or I'm going to a wedding for this weekend. So I'm going to lose a couple days on the Friday and Monday. So that's something, time management is extremely important in all this.
Yeah, and we're talking about comic books, not other professions that are here at the show this weekend. But we have heard many people coming from other professions say, if I've got a weekend open and I'm not going anywhere and my partner's out of the house for the weekend, I don't have anything to do. Do you have a cover I could do this weekend? We can assign them something on a Friday. They turn it in on Monday, and that cover is on stands in about a month. There aren't a lot of professions that turnaround time happens. You turn in a cover, and about a month later, it comes out. That's real time, and it's on the stands. You can walk up to it and say, "Hey, I made this thing." So that direct timeline, that direct fast timeline of production to finished product is super quick in comics.
We had a question here first, then we'll come back here. Yeah.
Or I have a question in regards to producing like a page a day. When it comes to producing that page, is it just literally just one page, or like you have a bunch of thumbnails to kind of like sketch out the idea, and you come with the idea of that page and then commit to it, and then send it to you guys? All that is incorporated in one day for like, for example, for penciling. Is that kind of how it works, or?
It's always different because I don't get too caught up in the exact schedule of it all, right? Because we said 3.5 pages a week, right, for a full comic. Those 1.5 days that you don't work, you don't have a page done. Those are roughly in the span of a month when you would finish the layouts. So we have a lot of artists who will spend the first week and a half doing layouts, doing thumbnails, and then they get on 3.5 grind with the trend and stuff. But it's like close to like 3.75 or like fraction. So that you can get minuscule with it all, but it depends on what your work style is like. Some artists like to do all the thumbnails up front when they get the full scripts. They can kind of explore where they might use some of their tricks and blow out a page, or use an interesting layout, or make something really simple, or use just a 9-panel grid. And so they like to see it all in place from the start and then dive into it, make any adjustments and then dive into it. Some people like to do a thumbnail and then get started on that page, and a thumbnail and get started on that page. So it's not so much about how many pages a day when it comes to thumbnails and that prep work. You have to figure out what works for you.
That question as well?
Mine comes similar to this. When you say 3.5 pages, is that usually somebody, say, doing pencils or inks, or is that for a full page?
It's for 3.5 full single pages in a week. So I say 3.5 full single, so it's 3.5 pages a week. Yeah, so pencils. Yeah. And if you've got an inker, the inker will come in after you, and they'll basically do a page a day. Inker's job does typically go faster, and a colorist's job goes even faster. Sometimes colorists can do, an average colorist can do about 2.5 pages a day of colors.
And if you're penciling inking yourself, we adjust for that in the scheduling when we set the deadlines.
Yeah. Hey.
And the part that you guys oversee, is that including like larger graphic novels as well as like the fewer to younger, or is it just your topic, like 20 pages that you oversee?
It's a definite difficult question to answer in a short amount of time, but for I oversee everything.
Yeah.
But the editorial team at Marvel, most of the editorial teams at Marvel just do the 80 to 90 comics that we put out every month. But we have a separate editorial team who does the YA fiction, who does the graphic novels with, be it Scholastic or Abrams or one per second. So we have different editorial teams for that, and that's a completely kind of different way of working, because we do full manuscripts and then full layouts, and then but those are like year-long processes, because we're talking about everything between 64 to 180 page graphic novels. But
to your point though, CB does oversee all of that, and we do advise on the hiring for the talent for all of that too. And then something else you said was like your average comics, like the Amazing Spider-Man might be our average Marvel mainstream superhero comic. Something we've really embraced over the last 5 or 10 years, especially during CB's tenure as editor-in-chief, is that we do have all ages animated books in our main line, and we've got horror comics in our main line, stuff that wouldn't have typically been mainstream comics. Marvel's helping bring into the mainstream a little bit more by embracing those kinds of audiences and expanding it, so that if someone sees a Peach Momoko variant cover or Peach Momoko Demon Days miniseries on this book, and then sees her do a variant cover on Amazing Spider-Man, you might pick it up, you might flip through it. So that's the importance of expanding the kinds of artists that we work with.
And one of the big genres that we're moving into now, we've been doing it for about a year, is I'm sure everyone knows webtoons. We do our own vertical comic line called Infinity Comics, and it's been extremely successful for us.
Yeah.
Doing books in mainstream continuity, but also doing Alligator Loki and Jeff the Land Shark and all these fun different vertical comics, because it's just where a lot of the readership is now, and it's a good way to expose people to comics that might not necessarily go into a comic shop anymore and pick it up. So we're very actively looking for artists who can tell stories vertically, because it is a little bit different mindset. Some of our comic artists have been able to do it and change it from going this way to going this way, but some can't. There's like, no, mentally we've been doing this for so long, we can't tell a story vertically.
Yeah.
And
audiences for webtoons, want a different kind of product that isn't the normal mainstream American superhero comic. And so we've been also able to go into like romance comics, horror, cooking, real life, slice of life comics, like embracing all of that stuff. So I'm gonna jump into real quick just to kind of express even more the thesis of this panel, which is the broadness of the styles that we have at Marvel these days.
And this is very simple. Like we go to depth about every single one of these, but just to show you that like Marvel's not just a house style. Here's kind of some of the different styles that we're using.
Yeah,
and this is very basic, so don't take it.
This is all we have. Yeah, the 7 things we use. So we got representational comics. We call it representational art, more mainstream American superhero art that's jumping out, dynamic, in your face, powerful images. This is Greg Land and Frankie D'Armata. For a new book we have called All Out Avengers, which is a nonstop Avengers adventure. And then next up, we've got kind of an ink wash. This is an ink wash covered by DK Ruan and a colorist named Matt Wilson. DK did an ink wash style on the line art, and Matt was able to go in there and color it digitally so that it maintains some of that ink wash feel and colors. We've got this black and white cover. Sometimes we just do straight, stark black and white art. And when you do black and white art, you guys can, I feel like this group in here can see the textures and the lighting that's implied even without the color here. This is by Jim Chung, longtime Marvel artist, on a book called Hulk #3. And then there's monochromatic art by Bill Sienkiewicz. Bill's been working in comics 35 years as well, mostly known for New Mutants and expanding what Marvel Comics was in the 80s, and he's still doing it today. Next up is this design-oriented cover by Tom Riley, much more stark and contrasting. When you put the logo on there, it stands out on stands. And on your iPad, if you're looking at comics on the Comixology app. As we're going into, we've been working with manga artists for years. This is a non-stop Spider-Man cover by Takashi Okazaki. Enrico Renzi is the colorist on this. Takashi was open to working with a Western colorist on this piece, but it brings that energy and excitement from a manga style artist into the Marvel superhero comics. Takashi, forgive me, is Afro Samurai.
He did Afro Samurai, and if anyone watched Star Wars Visions, he did the first episode of that. Which is just the comic book sequel to that just came out Wednesday. That
Yeah,
he wrote and drew.
just came out. Yeah, in the same style. But you can see, again, CV, so we can go on this forever. You can see some of the elements that he's got in here that are manga staples that we use across our line in different ways. So those influences are starting to cross over more and more. I mentioned the All Ages books. This is a Spider-Man Double Trouble cover by Gurihiru. Really straightforward cell style coloring, a little bit extra texture in the coloring, but real basic and straightforward in its intent. You've got digital paints. This is a cover by Stanley R. Jerem Lau. Stanley's huge online. This is for AXE Judgment Day #6, but really brilliant colors and things that stand out even when he switches it over from RGB to seem wicked. You've got traditional paints. This is Alex Ross. Alex usually works in gouache and water-based paints to get different levels of transparency in his work. And then we've got even digital paints over pencils. This is a penciler named Kreese Lee. He's a Korean penciler and a Korean digital painter named Woo Dae Shim. And we got them together to get a big dynamic superhero shot, but with that great rendering and 3D look of a digital artist. So it's a bunch of different art styles that we use all together every week across different editorial groups, and we're managing all those looks and managing all those careers at the same time. And ultimately, we've got all of these different styles every week, every month, every year coming out from Marvel that hopefully appeal to people in different ways. And people who are interested in different things to come in, stop by a comic shop, and maybe flip through a comic that interests them.
Yeah, our philosophy is you never know what's going to catch someone's eye on a stand. And, the importance of the comic book cover is, one, is a sales tool in the catalog and selling it to retailers. And that's something that we do more behind the scenes because the retailers want to see it and know what's in the story and, know what they're selling. But then once they put it on the stand, that's where the cover's main job comes into focus, where it is supposed to grab the eye and be something different from the rest of the comic book covers on the stand. So if a fan is walking by and just looks at, they're going to pick something out and go, oh, what's that? I'm going to pick that up. So we want them to pick up Spider-Man rather than Batman or Superman or Hellboy. No offense, Mike Mignola, we love Hellboy. We definitely want everybody to read Hellboy. But, that's the job of what the cover artist does. And especially if we work from home now still, unfortunately. We're not back in our office. But when we had our office, we had an enormous cover wall, probably about the size of this, where every week we would change it and put out every cover from that week. So the editors could go up and see what worked and what didn't, what stood out, what didn't, what colors were being overused maybe one month, what layout has been, we've seen over and over again. But just looking at this, I mean, you can see the ones that kind of, everyone's different, but seeing ones that stand out is, we showed that Wasp graphic cover earlier. There was an Ant-Man series that came out, so that third cover from the top left, it really stands out. And there's, a bunch of them you can see that really pop when you look at them. And everyone likes something different. Like, our old editor-in-chief, Joe Quesada used to say, white always works on a cover. A white background will always stand out. And the thing we notice here is there's very few covers with white backgrounds. So if I was looking at this cover wall, I probably said, next month we might want to focus a little bit more on some white covers to pop off, because the colors on these were bright and more vibrant. We might want to pull it back a little to make things that kind of stand out. So it's just a learning process for us and our artists as we go along. And like we said, we're always looking for new styles, new artists, and new sensibilities and designs to bring to cover our work at Marvel.
Just what's in all these amazing covers? I just want to ask you, which is the best way to make a character pop? Talking about the us2 or 1G.
Sure, because the question is, what's the best way to make a character pop on a cover? And light, texture, shadows, costume, it's literally all of the above. First and foremost, it's composition. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like even though we had all those covers, I'll go back and put them back up again for you. Yeah. Something that stands out on all of them really is dynamism. And so people say what makes Marvel Comics different. So whether or not it's an all ages cover or it's a painted cover or a black and white cover, there's a depth and a feel and energy that came from Jack Kirby. And whether or not you're a fan of Jack Kirby's art, if you look at a cover by Jack Kirby, that art is coming out at you. And you want to feel it rushing towards you, and you want to be a part of that action. So that dynamism is super important. And so it's kind of a cop-out to say dynamism, but it is about the composition, understanding anatomy, understanding how to make your backgrounds a part of the story, how to draw the reader in. That's the dynamic aspect that we're talking about when we say dynamism in comics.
And one thing we didn't touch on to kind of address your question is, if you look at comics, especially from back in the 80s, there was, especially DC Comics, there was a lot of bursts and word balloons and text, in this issue, something you'll never see before, Stan Lee would love to do, the return of the Sinister Six. And that's something we got away from, especially in the 90s and early 2000s, because we wanted to start letting the art speak for itself. And we've been having a lot of conversations internally recently about the use of word balloons and bursts and kind of text on covers, because the cover art should be enough to stand on its own. And we're hiring the artists for their art. But sometimes just to bring a little extra pop to a cover or bring a reader's eye to it to make it extra special, it's always good to have some kind of call out or burst or text or balloon. And sometimes it works and sometimes it didn't, but it's something that we, and especially with our new, some of the new junior editors that have started on our team, to work to talk them through, because they come from a generation where they didn't know it. So we've started kind of bringing them back and bringing up 80s and 90s covers and kind of showing them what some of the more artistic ways to do that is.
But to the idea of character designs, you won't necessarily always design characters when you're working on a Marvel comic. A lot of those designs are handled carefully and by a group, and you might if you're working on interiors or in the new Ant-Man book that CB brought up before, there was a new design for the character, so the artist on that book got to design a new character. But if you're just drawing a cover or you're doing a fill-on issue, or even if you're John Romita Jr. drawing Amazing Spider-Man #1, that's the same Spider-Man costume. So it's not always the costume design necessarily, but you need to find ways, no matter what your project is for whatever industry you're in, to make the look of the character that you're handed, especially if it's work for hire, dynamic, and use that design to tell a story, even if it's a complicated design.
And the one thing to remember before we go to questions is that while we have these different jobs, like I said earlier, comics are a collaboration, and I truly do mean that. Like, there's always a dialogue that happens between every member of the team about how to put out the best possible comic, how to have the most fun in creating comics, because everybody has a good idea, and a good idea can come from anywhere. So as part of that creative team, it's the back and forth that makes it so much fun and makes for the best comic. So as a new penciler or a new cover artist or a new colorist, if you're coming into the comic book industry, especially as sometimes newer people are afraid to express their opinions, and that's natural in any relationship, be it work or personal. But never feel restrained to hold back if you really feel something, because you could someone might disagree with you, but they might listen to you. So, like I said, it's always open to interpretation and to opinion.
Yep. Any other questions? We got a question in the back.
A comment and a question. The provide the distinction between penciling and inking as not just speed. It was the penciler's the organic conceptual artist. The inker is the camera precise artist. Because the same thing also applies here with coloring. Your colors can be somebody providing the definition or the actual artwork of it. But for these artists, what would you tell them they should most show you to get work in marble, and what should they not show you?
Okay, well, to your first point, yes, that's a great point. And, in the immortal lines of Clerks and Kevin Smith, or was it Chasing Amy? Inkers are not tracers. That is not the case at all. And they've been fighting that perception since 1995 or whenever that movie came out. But the inker's job is invaluable. I mean, from adding depth and coloring feathering, line weight, perspective. And it's not just, in the old days, it would be, you see a penciled page, you would say BWS, and that was just black with stars. And it was like, oh, the inker just supposed to go in and fill that in. That's not their job. That's the least part of their job. Theirs is to really add the definition to the penciler's work. And we've heard since the dawn of digital art that the inkers are going to be replaced. The computers are going to find a way to you scan in the art and you push a button and it's going to be inked. And people have tried, trust me, and it never works. We work with more inkers as part of inkers. They're exactly just a hugely valuable part of our team.
Yeah.
And now to answer the second part of the question, what advice would we give?
I was excited when I saw so many hands go up. I don't know how many of y'all have portfolios that you built for the show. Yeah, so when putting together your portfolio, especially a portfolio for in person, you want to put together a portfolio that shows what you want to do. And I know that sounds really simple, but it's if you want to be an inker, have pencils by somebody in your inks in the portfolio, 4 or 5 pages to show how you would work over different kinds of line artists too, to show the variety of work you can do, because you're not always going to be able to work with the same penciler if you're an inker. And if you're a penciler, you're not always typically going to be just allowed to pick who your inker is. And the same is true for colors. Schedules come up and a colorist that you love working with may not be available for the next project. So you want to be able to show what you can do over different kinds of styles, and especially the styles that you're interested in working over. So that's with whether you're a pencil inker or colorist, right? If you're wanting to be a cover artist, put those in your portfolio. If you're wanting to be a interior sequential artist, put 3 or 4 page sequentials in your samples, because that way we can tell if you understand some fundamentals. Those fundamentals are things that your teachers and people that you've heard online have said a million times, but I'll say it again, is anatomy, perspective, and continuity of environment and action. If somebody's about to punch somebody in the face in this panel with their right hand, and the next panel when they're following through, it should be their right hand and not their left hand. You don't know how many times we see professionals do that. And it doesn't make any sense. And if it happened in a movie, it would be a very bad movie that I would love. But you want to have that continuity of environment. If you set some sort of an anchor point in the panel like this video screen on this podium, echo that anchor point throughout the rest of the panels as you show that podium and the rest of your panels. That's continuity. You want to show that. And the anatomy is super hard and perspective is super hard, and that's why I'm not an artist. But if you can master those two, then you can get to foreshortening, and that makes your pages even more powerful. And then small things like don't put the hands outside the panels. This is acting. Comics are melodrama. Comics are almost soap opera, as powerful and big as they are. I've been talking to you like this with my hands. Have your characters doing that. Hands are hard to draw. I'm not an artist, so I don't have to do it. You have to. But have the hands up. Wolverine's claws. Don't crop them on the side of the panel. Have Wolverine's claws in the page. Even better, have them pointed at the reader. Those are really hard to draw because it's foreshortening. So these are all things you have to push yourself towards in your samples, so that portfolio reviewer can see those really basic fundamentals and go, oh, this is a person who's doing. So if you're a penciler, 3 or 4 pages of sequential art and a couple covers. If you're an inker, inks over different kinds of styles and include the original pencils there too, so we can compare the two. If you're a cover artist, 5 or 6 covers that show different styles and different approaches to covers, whether it's just a pinup or a big exciting action scene with a bunch of different characters doing things at the same time, or anything in between. We don't typically do pinups. You can look at this stack of pages, the stack of covers here, and you can see none of these are really pinups. Maybe that alien one, but it's scary.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Of course, in interiors, we want to see storytelling because that's what's most important. But even on covers, there has to be storytelling involved, no matter how simple the image may be in the pinup. You know, if you do a pinup of Wolverine, yeah, you got to think about what's the background, what's his pose, why is 3 claws out, why are 2 claws out, who's against, where's their blood, why is there blood in the snow, why is there, you know, blood on the building, you know, is there a shadow, is there a laser pointer, is there a hair on his back? There's all kinds of different storytelling things that you can bring to that cover. Even that Shang-Chi cover, it's the third row down, second from the left, I guess. You know, it looks like a very simple cover, but you really can't see it here. Reviewing, going close, the way it was colored with the shadows over his eyes, I think there might even be some blood on his lip. Like the way that they spaced out the 10 rings unevenly. There was a thought process that went into that to come up with a cool cover that have you go to that because it's black and it sounds like you can go, oh man, what happened there? I want to pick that up and put that cover in it. Yeah, so the storytelling aspect is especially the most important, even in quote unquote pinup covers.
Yeah, so every once in a while, especially on retailer variants and very specific kinds of products, we'll do pinups, but pinups aren't really where covers are at these days. You got to be able to tell a story on those covers for sure, and all these covers do that.
And on the term in regards to that camera, Alex Maleev, who some of you might know, he's one of the all-time greats. You know, he does Moon Knight and Daredevil. He's doing Scarlet now, and he says, I use a DSLR Canon Plus MK25D to photograph all my artwork. It's the best thing on the market. Whoever needs advice, feel free to let them know to contact me directly. So I don't think you knew who I was talking to. Here's Alex Maleev's personal email.
But you had a question here?
Yes. So one of the things that I struggle with both in making comics and reading comics sometimes is readability with framing. So the panels sometimes, we were talking about dynamism before, trying to make sure that it's dynamic. And that balance of like whether it's like, you don't want it to be like square panels or anything like that. You want it to be kind of, interesting. And I've heard some tricks before about like using the eyes of the characters to lead you to the next panel. But like, what are some tricks that you guys, one of the things you guys keep in mind when thinking about, okay, is this readable for the reader, for them to be able to understand the progression of this, if it's an interesting or dynamic?
Yeah, I think the thing we call that is eyeline guidance for readers is just kind of making it easier for them to go across the entire compositional grid of the page, so it moves quicker. I wouldn't worry about that so much as you're starting to put together your samples. You can do a million things, and we could do all kinds of conversations in a portfolio review, but whether it's a background element where something's fallen over, and so that points down to the left, the lower left, or you want someone to stop, and so it's a panel with no panel border, and it's just a silhouetted character sitting there. There are lots of different tricks to I think a great example of that stuff are a lot of European comics. Not a lot of those styles are used in mainstream American superhero comics, but there's a booth at the show called the Stuart Ing book booth, and he's in the back left corner if you walk in. There's a lot of European or French OGNs that are over there that you won't understand because they're in French, unless you speak French. Congratulations. But in the background, he'll use a lot of shadows and lights and props and environmental elements to help draw the eye across from different pages. I don't know about the eyeballs doing it so much. I think the more important thing that you need to do to keep in mind, especially as you're putting together your portfolio samples, is don't draw around eyeballs all the time. A big indicator of emotion in comics is the hands and the eyeballs.
Yeah.
And you want to really change up the shapes and not just the eyebrows. You want to change the underlid. You want to make it. You want to make your character be able to express their emotion with just their eyes and their hands. Everything else was covered up if you had to.
And just a couple quick sound bites, and you've got to learn how to build a page before you can break a page, and that's where all that crazy storytelling comes that we don't understand. And I know new pencilers don't like to hear it, but the 3 rules that we always give are, when you're doing this, if you're in doubt, just stick to the grit. There's nothing wrong with simple 9-panel page, 6-panel page. Make sure that most of your gutters are white, because there is a optical psychological thing about the story beat why white gutters help out. It's that quick pause that the eye makes and the brain can refocus to go into the next panel. And then don't break panel borders up, always go down. So many people break it up and you just create this endless loop where you never get to the second half of the page. And you can do it for design reasons when you're Olivier Coipel or Adam Kubert or Alex Ross, but stick just, and if you do break panel borders, only do it 2 or 3 times an issue, if that, because how many times it's like, could you break out? It's supposed to be for maximum impact. If every page is somebody jumping out of a panel or breaking the border or Wolverine slashing across the panel 1 to panel 9, it just gets old after a while. Like you said, you've read million comics, as have we, where it just doesn't work. So make it stupid, because your job is to make sure that the reader understands the storytelling and the story from panel to panel, and page to page. And if you can connect all those dots from panel 1 on page 1 to panel 9 on page 20, then you've done your job as a storyteller. Yeah, that's what really counts, because artists are storytellers.
I think there was a question. Wait, this guy over here.
Yes, for portfolio reviews, two kind of connected questions. Do you guys look for a variety of different like stories in the pages, like maybe an action page, a conversation page, or what kind of variety do you look for?
Real quick, I would do a mix of both. Like Ricky said, 3 pages. We usually did 4 or 5. Include a couple action sequences so we can see you drawing the Marvel characters and superheroes in costumes using their powers. But it's also important to have what we call talking head scenes. It's Spider-Man and Mary Jane talking at a diner eating pancakes. You know, those are equally important to show that you can handle both, because that's the dynamics of the medium, and also like Ricky said, the storytelling with the hands and the eyes.
Yeah. And so we're not doing portfolio reviews here, but if we do offer sample scripts, so you don't have to worry about writing your own story. That's really difficult for artists, right? You're trying to figure out a 3-page sequence, and you don't know where to start, and you're not a writer. You're not trying to be a writer. We offer 3 to 5 page sample scripts that are from actual comics that were published by professional writers that test artists in different areas of the field, and we can send those out to anybody who's interested in asking for one. I'll give you my email address if anyone wants to write it down. Me and my team send this out to people. So my email address is R, and then my last name Purdin, RPURDIN @marvel.com. And if you email me and you say Lightbox and sample script in the subject line, I can certainly toss you a sample script so you can see what it's like. But to your question, like CB said, we've got sample scripts that will show you a talking scene, a fight, and then the resolution, or a talking scene and then a romantic moment and the resolution. So if you can have sample scripts if you have samples in your folder, sequential samples that explain how you understand the continuity of a scene, and then a sample that shows how you understand an action scene, sample scene that shows how you understand horses. I don't know. All of these things help show what you can do as an artist. I think we've gone over at this point.
We can go outside, I think, if people want to have
specific questions. The answers.
We're going to be here all weekend too. So if you see us walking, we can go outside now if you want to ask specific questions. And if you see us walking around over the course of the weekend, want to stop us, please.
You guys don't have a booth, do you?
No, unfortunately not this year. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming, though. Thank you.